What's up, guys? Metal571 here, and today we're going to talk about a crazy high-end headphone, the Audeze LCD-3 Fazor. And I'm going to be comparing it against my HD800, which is my primary comparison point for high-end, really high-end headphones. So what is this headphone all about? Actually, I usually talk about what is this headphone intended for, but honestly, couldn't find a serious answer to that on Audeze's own website. So really, it seems to be targeted at listening enjoyment, but it's also, a relatively neutral enough headphone that I feel like some studios may be interested in this kind of a sound. So it kind of does double duty. Regardless of what it's really intended for, this is an open back, planar magnetic driver headphone. And the build quality, as you can probably see here, is really amazing. You've got really exotic wood going on here. I'm not actually sure exactly what kind of wood this is, but it's really well finished. You've got these metal covers on the back here for each on each ear cup. You've got these incredibly luxurious, very soft, very thick, I believe these are lambskin leather pads, and also a lambskin headband here. So super luxurious leather going on everywhere. The adjustments for how big your head is are made of metal here, of course, and they work pretty well. You just pull them up or down depending on the size of your noggin. And then the ports here where you plug in your cable are also very strongly built. So I really don't have any complaints, and I better not, because this right here is a $2,000 headphone, almost. It's like $1,945, something like that. So it's but the downside of a lot of planar magnetics is they're heavy, and this is a heavy headphone. I'm sure you can find the exact weight online. I don't have it on hand. So these are built very well. Let's talk about some other stuff that they come with. This cable, or at least this was what my rental came with from Lumoid. You should definitely check out Lumoid. They have rentals for really high-end stuff like this that I usually wouldn't be able to bring to this channel normally. So the cable is mini XLR on this end, and then you get one of the largest 1/4-inch jacks I've ever seen. This is crazy, just really wide and really strong. So it's well designed. You get that. You get a adapter here that says Audeze on it, and this is for 1/4-inch to 3.5mm. For some reason, you're plugging this into a 3.5mm source. I can't imagine anybody with amps that really, or people who have this headphone probably don't have an amp with this kind of a jack on it, but they give you it anyway. And then there's another option here, the balanced stereo balanced cable. They also give you that in the box. And speaking of the box, this thing comes with the most ridiculous case I've ever seen. This is a Pelican case. It is like military grade. You basically open up the sides like this and then flip it open, and inside you've got a protector for the headphone with a bunch of foam, and underneath is where the cables go in there. So it's just really the complete package here in terms of build quality and all the accessories included, including the crazy strong case. So now that we have that out of the way, I want to talk about the comfort a little bit. Comfort here is, I wouldn't say a mixed bag. It's actually mostly positive, despite how heavy these are and despite how they sit on your head. Honestly, I didn't find them that uncomfortable, but I know some people will have issues with these for long-term listening. But that said, the headband, actually the headband's not the best point here. It doesn't have a huge amount of padding, and it probably should have a little bit more. This can be solved with some aftermarket padding that you can add up here. But as far as the ear cups go, you can see how soft these things are. They distribute the weight pretty well. And I didn't have any serious issues with comfort here. but at one point it was hurting me a little bit above my ear on the right side only. Could be because of my glasses, so I was probably pressing against them to stay on. And but other than that, I was fine. But again, your results may differ, and these are definitely on the weighty side, of course. Now, the sound of these headphones, the bass. So the bass on these, now when Audeze upgraded these to a Fazor version, a lot of measurements show, and people have said that they dropped off some of the lowest sub bass here. Weirdly, I ran these through an audio check, going way down from like all the way down to like 10 or 20 hertz, and I really didn't hear any roll off. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but I didn't have any problems with these. Those who know these headphones, and if you're watching this video, you probably have looked at some of the measurements at some point, because these are really only known in audiophile circles. The bass goes really, really low, and by really, really low, I mean it's basically just a line. It's just a line on a graph. It just keeps going, and it sounds like that. And it sounds like that in extension, but I find myself wanting just a little bit more quantity. And that's kind of due to the fact that I'm used to the Harman bass response, which tells you to basically boost under 200 hertz, a mild boost of about 3-4 dB, something like that. So I applied that with an EQ. It took it perfectly. You know, this headphone doesn't complain about bass. It just gives it to you. Now, the one thing I will say about the bass on this headphone, though, other than its amazing extension, is that it still has a little bit of a planar sound, and that is not the best thing. So this sounds slightly compressed, and that is something I've confirmed with some other members of the audiophile community. The LCD-3 has probably a slightly older Audeze design. The newer ones don't seem to have this problem as much. They've further, made revisions on their technology of planar magnetic drivers, but this one sounds like the bass hits a little bit looser. The leading edge of leading attack is a little bit slow, and that kind of makes them sound, really relaxed, not only in quantity, but also in the speed of the way the bass responds. I mean, I feel like they're fast enough for a lot of like really fast metal and stuff like that, but it's just the way it delivers the bass and the strikes of drums and stuff is a little bit on the chilled out side. So you kind of notice that with these. If you have another pair of headphones, especially dynamics, don't really suffer from this problem. So it's funny that I hadn't noticed it to that degree until I heard this one. I knew about it, but I never actually heard it in person. But otherwise, though, the bass is amazingly extended, very relaxed. It's just a line, and the quantity differs that people prefer from one person to the next. I think it just needs a couple more dB, maybe 3 dB, below 200 hertz, but you probably don't need it because the rest of the headphone's pretty relaxed, which is what I'm going to talk about next. The mid-range, moving up, the head-range of this headphone is very luscious and very, very, again, relaxed. So the upper mid-range peak here is actually, from what I hear, maybe like 1 or 2 dB a little lower than maybe it should be. And this will have no problems delivering amazing detailed guitar, but it's in a very relaxed fashion again. The mid-range, though, has a really good detail to it, and some people have called it a blacker background that planar magnetics tend to have. I find this really excels in the mids because of that. And so you get these like micro details, a little bit more from guitar and distorted guitar, not distorted guitar, anything that falls into that kind of mid-range is just really liquidy and sounding, and it's really smooth, and you won't really have any problems with harshness on the mids here. Just definitely not. They're way too relaxed for that. How many times am I going to use that adjective in this video? I know you're asking that. Probably a couple more times. So then the treble here also kind of laid back. So how can the bass, mids, and treble all be laid out, Metal 571? You can't have them all be laid back at the same time. Well, this headphone kind of has where the headphone tends to peak is actually strangely in the low mid range. You kind of hear like around 500 to 1,000 hertz. You've got a little bit of a bump there versus some other headphones. So they have a lot of richness in the mids, but not a lot of harshness. Not an overly ridiculous amount of bass, and also not a whole lot of treble peakiness at all either. So they're a very downsloping response, but without the kind of boost in the bass that I tend to like a little bit there. So that's kind of the overall sound of these. The treble, though, although this is a really high-end headphone, I actually had really high hopes for the treble here. I've heard some really nice Audeze treble. I know it also tends to vary between unit to unit, more so than some other headphones. On this one, I didn't hear any annoying peaks going on. There might have been a really narrow one at 11K that I noticed on this particular unit, but other than that, it was very smooth, and a lot of people will find it very dark and very boring. But for me, I think it's great because it works with all genres. You don't really have any problems with bright music making these unlistenable. You never really run into that problem pretty much ever. But the downside is comparing directly to my HD800, which I have equalized significantly to make it sound more like an HD600, HD650, but with more detail, more soundstage, all that stuff. That video is coming. I know. Don't worry. It's going to happen. But comparing this to that kind of a sound, it really seems like the treble here just is not quite as detailed as the HD800. The dynamics of this headphone are a little dull, and the treble detail is just a bit on the etchy side. But I tried to confirm to myself that that wasn't the case by like notching out EQ here and there. Maybe there was some peak that made me think. They made me think like the treble was not as fast as it should be, just because it sounded like there was like a peak somewhere, but I really couldn't find it. I just couldn't find it. So it just doesn't sound like the treble here. Don't get me wrong, it's really extended, it's really easy to listen to, and it's wonderful, but compared to the HD800, it just doesn't have the same level of speed, and that's what I'm hearing. So overall, the sound is just, it's really enjoyable here, but is it really worth $2,000 for this sound? Now, if you don't use any EQ on it or on any headphone, and oh yeah, disclaimer, I am comparing this against the HD800 on just a little Modi 1 Magni 2 stack. I don't have some crazy Cavalli liquid carbon going on here, guys. So the results could vary from what I'm describing here. But on the same setup, I'm comparing the two headphones, and this is what I've heard. So that's how it is here. But yeah, again, the bass is relaxed. The mids don't have too much of a harsh peak, and the low mids are warm and smooth. And the treble never really fatigues here. Although it does sound like it's a little bit brighter than some other LCD cans I've heard. But it just doesn't have quite the detail in the treble. It's a little bit faster in the mid-range than the HD800, a little bit more detailed there, and the bass extends just by default, whereas you have to kind of bring that out of the HD800, even though it's capable of it. And the dynamics here are, relaxed. So that's what the overall sound is like here. As far as the soundstage goes, I thought the soundstage here was better than I expected. Audeze's earlier models are really not known to have quite as large a soundstage here. I thought the soundstage was almost as wide as the HD800, which was really nice. But the imaging is a little bit unusual. I think I heard kind of a 3-blob-ish thing going on here too, where you have some center imaging, and then it's just kind of like way off to the sides imaging a bit. That's what I think I've heard from what I demoed on these, but you guys can tell me what you think. But the soundstage here also not quite on the same level as the HD800. But the sound with no equalization whatsoever, straight in as it is really relaxed and chilled out, and just, you can listen to it for a long time, as long as you don't get tired of wearing the weight on your head. So overall, this is a darker, smoother alternative to just about all the other high-end headphones that are dynamic, which tend to be tuned more to a diffuse field curve that's very bright. Again, I'm talking about neutrality in a separate video, but I tend to not like that as much. I tend to like this kind of signature a lot more, so I tune a lot of headphones close to what Audeze has here. Almost the same, but I would hope that there's a little bit more speed there. So in conclusion here, overall, the HD800 with my custom equalization is still something I prefer over this headphone. Paying twice as much for this with no EQ will get you basically a headphone that's a little slower, much easier to listen to than the HD800 without EQ. And the problem, another issue that people run into with Audeze's, the LCDs, is reliability. I've heard so many people say that they've had like 1, 2, 3 different units and just drivers just straight out die. And I hope that that's been fixed by now, because these have been around for some time. But you guys should be aware of this, so I'm mentioning it here. But that it still doesn't make the LCD-3 a horrible headphone, but I wouldn't buy one used personally. I feel like the risk of it's kind of high, that you might get one that's just going to die randomly, and then where's your warranty, you know? So overall, the 800 is faster delivery of dynamics. It has more treble detail, a wider soundstage. It's more reliable, and it costs half as much, and it's more comfortable than this headphone. So that's it makes this one sound like it's bad, but you have to realize that at this price range, there are pretty much no really horrible headphones. But again, the advantage here, you put it on, you plug it in, and it's really fun. And you don't have to worry about things blowing your eardrums out with treble. HD800, very different experience without EQ, without mods, without amp pairing adjustments. If you don't do all of that stuff with the 800, then I don't find it to be very enjoyable. But this is just there. And the quality is awesome. However, I really am not sure why this headphone has a somewhat unreliable tendency in some cases. So that's what I think of the Audeze LCD-3. I really appreciate, though, what Audeze's done with the tuning of this headphone. Not enough manufacturers tune to a more speaker-like sounding response, where a lot of them are still stuck in this world of diffuse feel, where the treble is way too high, the bass is too lean, and you're just given this treble fest. And I can't stand that. Like Beyerdynamics T1, the HD800, and probably the 812, looking at the measurements, I haven't actually heard one yet, all like this diffuse feel response. And this is like, no, that's wrong, totally wrong. We want a headphone to be fun. We want it to be enjoyable. And we don't want to have to make you mod the crap out of it to get it to that point. That's Audeze for you. And with that, that's what I think of the Audeze LCD-3. Hope you enjoyed this review, guys. Stay tuned. A lot more reviews coming soon, and I'll see you again in a bit.